Yeah, I know. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Gold Mine. We have another fantastic show for you lined up today. Very excited. We're going to be talking reconnaissance, recce, recon, all of that good stuff. We're going to be sneaking in and looking at some stuff. So, really excited to get this going. We got Seb joining us. We got Gunny joining us. We got Shaun here. Unfortunately, Mike's not able to make it. He had a flight switch over, but that is the way of things. So we are going to carry on and keep doing our best. Now, let's get some intros into it and out of the way, and then we can join into the convo. Seb, you're on top. 10 to 15 seconds. Who are you? Where you come from? All that good stuff.
Yeah, been here a million times. So good to go. Can't wait to start this convo.
Gonna be a gooder. Tim, how about yourself?
Roger that. In my 23 years, I spent half of it in reconnaissance and snipers through the rank of trooper through to warrant officer, and I was even platoon commander for a year, platoon warrant for 2 years. That's me.
Bam. Love it. Shaun, how's life in the mountains?
It's even better now that I'm hanging out with my buddies.
It is. I'm excited for this one. It's going to be awesome. John jumped in here, says all my favorite peeps in one potty, Patty, whatever. There he goes. Corrects himself. Excellent. Now, if there are any thoughts, questions, comments, anything at all, by all means, put them up in the comment section and we can engage those right away throughout the show. Other than that, I am looking forward to this. So we're going to get into this at its root, reconnaissance. I'm going to start with Gunny on this one, and here's the question. What to you is reconnaissance, Gunny?
It's about building your plan. If you have an objective that you have to achieve, you need to have the intelligence eyes on. You have to have all that knowledge in order to build that plan. So reconnaissance can be anything from you're in the field or urban, so rural or urban settings. So that gives you the biggest picture in order to plan your mission, because without the reconnaissance, your mission will fail.
There we go. Absolutely. Seb, what does reconnaissance mean to you?
Yeah, precisely what was said. Intel gathering operation to confirm or deny some of the courses of action that you're looking at, including your contingencies and whatnot. Even, it could go target locations. It could go like there's a million different sort of offshoots of that. But essentially, intel gathering, knowing exactly what you're dealing with. In our world, it could be where are you going to establish your CCPs? Where are your breaching points? Where are your there's a million different things that you'd be looking at in a tactical setting. If you're not in a tactical setting, you can apply it metaphorically, obviously.
Absolutely. Shaun, first thoughts on what is reconnaissance to you?
That's right. I cheated. I made some notes. So before I came on, I thought I'd better scribbledy-doo down some stuff. So here's the very top line. Recon. The eyes and ears. And I think that's pretty much it, man. I mean, if you ran out of words, those would be the only words that you'd need. It's the eyes and ears. Not just your eyes and ears, but the eyes and ears for the unit that you're reporting to, that you're responsible for, that you're part of, that you're looking after. And that can be in the military, policing, or professional world. You can be in a suit and tie, and you can be a frickin' rad recon operator in a business suit. And so, again, it's the eyes and ears of the unit that you're working within. And so some of the core principles that I scribbled down here are the ability to have good observation, analysis, and reporting abilities. You need a unique mindset. You need to be adaptable, critical thinking, and situationally aware. You have to have some skills. And I'm not talking about the hard skills like how to make sure that you've got the binoculars facing the right direction. You need to have skills like information gathering, risk assessment and planning, and problem solving. And then finally, to apply it, you can apply it across a bunch of different battlefields or corporate fields. But essentially, these things recon can play out as such. You could be good at market research, competitor analysis, the power of observation in the boardroom, applicable to strategic planning of complex projects with clear contingencies and rapid responses, small team leadership that is scalable. It goes on and on. So recon is not just a mission set. It's not just a profession. It's not just an individual. It's not just skills and and natural tendencies. It's a whole pile of things all wrapped up together that creates an experienced individual who can really shift things, not only on the battlefield, but within the corporate space as well.
Yeah, that's absolutely. I was thinking about this a little bit beforehand, obviously before we got started, and my thought was that it was really at its core, it's like information gathering and how good you can get how well you can gather that information in of itself. But the question I want to ask you guys right away, you guys have lots of experience doing lots of recce's, lots of time in the field, lots of time practicing and training and so on and so forth. But what do you think is the biggest lesson that reconnaissance has taught you of all the things, of all the recce's that you've done over time? What's that one thing that you can touch on right now that you utilize on a regular basis? Gunny, coming to you first. What do you think?
Yeah, it's exactly what Shaun said there. It's my observational skills and my situational awareness. In my last job as executive protection, when we do reconnaissance, we call it advanced team, advanced work. We move ahead, plan all the routes and all that good stuff. But on that, not only am I planning routes, coordinating with my other forces, my other police forces, local forces. Big one is observation. When I'm on those venues, I'm observing how people are interacting, and particularly the staff at those sites. But the big one is on the day of is the observation of people. So reconnaissance really just comes down to observation, but that also has to be taught. So on the Army reconnaissance course, we teach observation. So I just want to give a quick point for that. So your primary thing when you're observing, especially if you're using, say, binos or just your eyes, remember we read left to right. When we observe, we always observe right to left. And why? Our head is so used to moving this direction quickly, you're going to miss things. If you move from right to left, you automatically slow down because it feels uncomfortable. So if everyone tries that, you'll observe more and take in more because you'll actually concentrate more.
I like that a lot. Seb, thoughts on this?
Yeah, and you can start a book from the back and just go all the way to the front, and it's a new book. You don't need to pay for anything. Yeah, very good point from Gunny here. Obviously, for me, in my experience in the policing world and in tactical operation, obviously, not conducting the recon is what some of the issues that we would be running into. So, for example, we have intelligence-led operations, and sometimes some of these investigators have been on these targets for months, and they have more information that you could ever dream of. But not going eyes on with an operator perspective on that target has led us to more problems than ever before, including even hitting the right target. I've been in the building a million times, and it's the last room on the left, and everybody is adamant that it's the last room on the left, and when you get there, it isn't. And so one of the biggest mistakes that we used to make from time to time was, well, there's a high risk of compromise. Therefore, we're going to kind of take the words of the investigators to try to drop our plans. And unfortunately, they just didn't look at targets the way we did. And then the secondary piece to this is not have all your specialties on your recce, and that's a big problem for us. And so having your breachers, having your medics, having your sniper TL, having all of those things on your, whether they're with you on the recce or conducting their own recce is irrelevant, but you want to make sure that your specialty have been eyes on that target. So that would apply in any other context, having the right people, the people that know what to do with the information they're seeing and how to process it, to be there in person instead of you trying to convey that.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Shaun, thoughts on this?
Well, Seb said it better than I did in my Instagram post this morning on my feed. And what I'd done is I'd considered recon as a whole and where it kind of goes wrong. And so Seb just described what I was trying to put across. And I think at a high level perspective, it is about the difference of academic versus practical experience, or academic recon versus practical recon. And so let me just break that out for a sec. So if you are a strong academic, but you don't have much practical real world experience, it's hard to tie your massive body of knowledge to how the world truly operates. And conversely, if you spend all your day in the field every single day of your life, but don't touch on the academic side of things, then your practical experience, though sound and time tested, doesn't evolve. It doesn't obligate you to think bigger or be influenced by more. You become a result of pressure tested results that are unimaginative, for lack of a better term. And so that's the point I was trying to make this morning is you have academic and you have practical experience. And that is also the case in the recon world or in the recce world or in the eyes and ears world. If you're behind your desk flying a drone somewhere overseas and you are now acting as eyes and ears for a specific unit, but you've never stood on sand or you've never stood in the dark rain in the mountains, or it's hard to tie what is actually happening on the ground beyond the academic. So you don't have a well-rounded sense of things. And so academic and practical experiences need to be balanced. And so the balance in this case is having the right people in the spot that they need to be, whether it's an academic person or a practical person, ensuring that the balance is correct for what is in front of you. And also the balance for yourself, which is I might be more of a practical person, but I need to shore up my academic side of the house in order to keep pushing my practical side of the house further, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go around the table on that. Gunny, got any thoughts on that?
That's a really good point, especially with the drone operator. If he hasn't spent time on the ground actually understanding what the reconnaissance troops go through, how is he really giving us a good visual of his aerial coverage? So that brings me to an example of, say, armored reconnaissance in the Army, where the armored reconnaissance will push out, throw up their surveillance that can see out to 24 kilometers. But the infantry guys who are conducting reconnaissance are often in front of that 24-kilometer screen with no backup. So they don't understand what we actually need, but they call themselves reconnaissance. But they're conducting their reconnaissance of an area, whereas the troops on the ground are going into point targets. So everybody has to have that appreciation of the different levels and what those different coverages, what they give you, because they all interlock. So we're all covering each other. But those guys in the armored reconnaissance have to have a good understanding of the hardship that the infantry reconnaissance goes through in order to be more effective to their job.
Absolutely. Seb, thoughts on this?
Yeah, I like both of those things, but what Shaun was talking about is academic sanitization, as I like to call it, where your reality is not grounded in actual reality, and it's going to cause massive issues unless there is some sort of bridge the gap that happens there. Now, if you're looking in a tactical context, for example, a missed recce or a missed opportunity at completing a recce in a professional manner and do so thoroughly means lives. In a corporate context, it may means losing a good contract or not realizing that Blockbuster, you should probably go online instead of continuing to sell, DVDs. True story. But I do believe that that's a thing. And the problem is it's really difficult to know when you are doing it. It's so unless you're open to that realization, but with higher academic learning, sometimes there is elitism that can creep in, and when that happens, you're less likely to seek the reality of those that have their feet on the ground, and that's a big problem.
Absolutely. Shaun, Gunny, what do you got?
I want to build on the academic side. So professional development in the battalions, we often give a list of readings. Prior to Afghanistan, one was Bear Went Over the Mountain. And what was quite interesting out of that was a lot of the places that we got hit were exactly in that book. because they were tested with the Russians, and they're lazy fighters, but effective. And they actually hit us in the same locations that were in that book. So fortunately, we didn't have casualties on some of those contacts, but it's kind of funny how they didn't deviate from the past.
That's a good point. I'm going to come back to that in a second. Shaun, you got any additional thoughts on this?
I do. Just let me grab a stage prop.
All very theatrical. This little slides across the...
That's just on the other side of my office. I broke out this bad boy this morning. I actually took a photo of it. I'm not going to show you too much of what's in there, but there's all kinds of little gems in here. And some of them are for my eyes only. Now, Tim had mentioned, the past. So making plans based on the past, which is precisely what I did this morning. I broke out the past. I had a 6B manual, I had a CQMS manual, I had a sniper manual, I had a patrol commander's briefing manual, I had my other stuff in my black book manuals, and I read through a bunch of them because I wanted to connect with the past again, to make sure that the lessons that I learned back then are still reinforced today, to understand what worked for me then and doesn't work for me now, what didn't work for me then but works for me now. So I really did like a 360 on the past. So, if I'm making the same mistakes that someone was making 20 years ago because I'm too lazy to pick up a book, that's on me. And as Tim said, it takes, I'm sure that before they got into that situation where it was a repeat of the past, I'm sure that the moment that it happened, everyone kind of thought, man, I wish I would have read that book. If everyone would have thought to have picked up the book beforehand, it would have been a different outcome, perhaps, or not. But the fact remains that you should never lose connection to the past on these kind of matters, because even if it's old information, even if you think in your head it's irrelevant, there was a point in your life when it was relevant, and you should be able to cherry pick some stuff out of there into your today and make it work in a corporate world, in a whatever world that you're in. But more importantly than making the history work in your relevant world today, you also get a good look at who you were back then and who you are now, and the delta between those two things. I'm still Shaun, but I've changed quite a lot. And the thoughts that I have from this book, even though they're fundamental and foundational to me, the principles, the concepts, the righteousness of it all, that none of that changes. The fundamentals don't change, but I change. And so I need to contextualize myself against what was fundamental then and is still fundamental now, and how I relate to those things.
I'm liking where we're going on this one. Seb, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I really like what Tim brought up there with the target being having been reckied and having all the information, and all of a sudden the situation repeats itself. I mean, it brings light to a variety of different things. It speaks to you looking at the tracking history or whatever it is that you were looking at, and make sure that you know all that you need to know that needs to be corroborated. So what we need to understand is that there's cognitive bias will sneak in, and if you take everything that was once reckied as your current reality, that's a problem. But also, if you discount it, that's another problem. So it's basically having a non-emotional attachment to what it is that you are going to verify, but you are confirming what is there, or you are confirming that it no longer is, or that the problem set has changed. With that, once you have done that, you also need to start thinking about what research gap is there on this target, because that's a lot of, we see that a lot. There's research gaps on the target, and then the next team will take it and conduct a recce that's exactly in line with the previous recce's. And even if the information has changed, there's no new information that has been obtained where there should be. So how can we shift? How can we paradigm shift by moving around the target, clover leafing in a different direction, going to the back? And I mean this metaphorically, obviously, but looking at it through a different lens, so that we can bring some of the target information to bear that hasn't been touched yet. So the confirmation or denial that the information is still accurate, and what new information can I bring so I can contribute to the team.
Absolutely. Gunny, got any additional thoughts on this?
The big one is, building on that is the experience and always building on experience and not being complacent. So back to executive protection, we're doing recce's every day. And when you go into new venues, yeah, you're more high alert. But if you're doing the same venue, just something as simple as the legislature, we go from the premier's office down to the media room. We do it a million times, but we still clear the stairs, clear the elevators, clear the hallways, then secure all those, and then move into our media room. So you have to treat your daily activity the same as if it was something new. And that is a hard thing to break. Complacency kills, and reconnaissance will prevent that. Effective reconnaissance, not just walking through the motions.
Yeah, that's a big part of that, right? Is being able to understand that that complacency, yes, but also familiarity, right? If you're in a familiar environment and you feel like this is totally normal and okay, that's when things go south, at least in my mind. What do you got, Sean?
Just a thought, and Tim knows this. We all know this, but I just want to clear this up for the audience. It's a minor nuance, but I don't want it to slip through the cracks. So when you're on now we're going to use a different term. It's not recon, it's advanced party. When you're advanced party for a team that is securing or analyzing or getting eyes on an objective before the principal or the main party arrives, you might have, and this is not at Tim, this is not at anyone, this is nuance. You might have walked back and forth between buildings or downstairs or in elevators a million times. And the difference between being complacent and being a professional is when you're complacent, it's a rote pattern. You don't even see what's going on. You just do your thing and you're not really picking up what's going on around you. But a professional will do a thing that they've done a million times. They'll be able to offload a bunch of it as autonomous responses. They know what's coming around the corner, so they know where they're going to put their left foot 12 paces from now, because they put that left foot there a bunch of times. And as they're approaching where they're going to put their left foot, they'll feel, I'm going to get back to that in a sec, they'll feel that the foot there is not the right call on that day, and they'll improvise, adapt, and overcome. And so there's rote patterns, and then there's experienced feel-based patterns. If you've done something a million times and you're a professional, here's how it works. You start feeling reconnaissance. You become it. You don't just read about it. And so here's a little thought construct for someone out there. If you have been in recon, you totally understand this. It's the middle of the night, pitch black, raining, cold. You're freaking miserable, hungry, and tired. You're down on one knee with your weapon, staring out into the pitch black. You've got your mouth partially open because you hear better that way. And you're not staring at what you're trying to dial up on. You're staring off to the side so that you can actually see it with the rods and cones correctly in your eyeballs. Now, with all of that in place, what a recon person is doing at that point as they feel their environment is they're expanding their sense of who they are in that moment. They're trying to feel beyond the hill. They're trying to feel beyond the mountain. They're trying to hear around the corner that they physically might not be able to hear. You're trying to experience the entire environment around you at a level that is more than it was a year ago. And so all of the things a year ago that you had to practically really focus on, like, I really have to pay attention to hearing things. Well, all of that stuff starts disappearing. You sense what's going on. And you know when you're in the right place at the right time is as you slowly scan from right to left, you'll look at your partner perhaps in the pitch black, and you know what they'll be doing? They'll have their mouth partially open, and they'll be frozen, still, not making a peep, not making a movement, not shedding off any vibe. You become inert vessels of eyes and ears. You feel the world around you. And that is only something that a person can understand if they've been experienced in the game a long, long time. And it doesn't have to be the military. It doesn't have to be policing. It could be in a boardroom. If you've been in the game a long time of the feel game, well, you can step in and know how things are going to go before things have gone. And so Recon isn't just campaigned, and it isn't just step by step by step, you get here, you get there. There's a whole pile of things involved in Recon that are almost metaphysical rather than just physical. It's just food for thought.
That is a beautiful nuance. Yeah, Gunny, what do you got?
Just want to add on that. That actually a good segue into what makes a good reconnaissanceman is the patrol spirit. And that is basically in the patrol spirit is you're feeling it. And how do you get there to feel it? Well, you need to be immersed in it, but you need to believe in it. You have to be in 100%. You're just not there as part of the patrol as a number two. You are there feeling every experience. The patrol spirit is the key to everything that you do. And that also brings in the spidey sense. If it doesn't feel right, it's probably not right.
Absolutely. Sab, you got any additional on this?
Yeah, I mean, you have to remember that you and your small team, regardless of context, are carrying the burden for the collective. What happens later that evening, what happens later that month, what happens later in the business world, whatever the case may be, is going to be hinging very strongly on the small attention to detail and the small steps that you are taking with your team the day that you are there. So it's an oversimplification to think, and nobody has said that obviously, but it's an oversimplification as an individual to think, okay, my job is important because this operation, X, Y, and Z. What's important though is like, yes, understanding that, but making sure that you assign real value to this. What I'm doing right now is going to be the difference between somebody, having a catastrophic, encountering something catastrophic that I missed. And so now you're sort of responsibilizing yourself in doing it better. So it's not just being there and seeking to observe and seeking the information. It's like, how can I really get as much as I can to prevent whatever catastrophic situation in whatever context it applies. And so once you understand your sort of your responsibility as a member of a team, it changes the way you address things. It changes the way you invest in it. And so I think it's just important not to downplay the importance that your 4-man, your 6-man, your 8-man recce, whatever it is, in the totality of the bigger picture, and how catastrophic any oversight or lack of attention to detail can be.
Yeah. Now, there's in addition to that, I just want to ask specifically is that there's going to be things that are missed, right? There's mistakes happen. People aren't perfect. There's things can be camouflaged well. The enemy is not always going to give you the opportunity. Perhaps you get compromised throughout all these things, right? How do we address those in terms of reconnaissance, in terms of information gathering? How do we then address the fact that mistakes happen, or you're given information that isn't correct, or you're, Seb, you gave the example earlier that last room on the left. Well, perhaps that person was looking at it opposite and didn't quite compensate that it's actually the last room on the right. That kind of stuff. How do we engage that in the moment when we're actually doing our reconnaissance? Go, oh man, it's something screwed up. Wait, hold on a second, and then where do we go from there? Gunny, I'm going to start with you. What do you think?
Well, you have to adapt to these situations, and how you do this is you have to have different courses of action, different COAs, in order to react to these instances. If you haven't got a course of action on what if this happens when you're planning, you're already set up for failure. You need to go into that. You need to go into a plan knowing that things will go wrong, and what are we going to do when this happens, and have an immediate action plan.
I like it. Shaun, what are you thinking?
I'm going to touch on two things. So I'm going to hit on what Seb just said and Tim just said as well. And that is, I just pulled this bad boy out of my little cheat sheet manual here. And really, it's just a 180 range card to some degree. And the most important part, I suppose, is this. The spot right here, right there. As you sit there, determining your first move as the party that just arrived on scene as the recon team. Now, that could be a corporate world, that could be a military world, that could be Leo, that could be any world that you want to imagine. You've just arrived on the deck, and now you're it, figuring out the future for a body that's behind you, a body of 10, 100, 1,000 people. It doesn't much matter. As you're in that spot, your job is to do this. Not screw up the deviation so much that when it deviates from here, a tiny little deviation ends up over here. The smallest mistakes at the front end cause the biggest problems a day or two later. You have to have your calibration so tight within Recon that you can't afford to make big mistakes, because little mistakes, timelined out, extrapolate out to massive mistakes. It sets a course trajectory that sometimes is almost undoable. So in that spot, you have to really prioritize that your decisions are extremely important in those first few operating moments, because you're setting the template to some degree of what's going to occur a day or two later, perhaps. So really, really, really understand the importance of critical thought and making the right decision for the team that's going to be following in momentarily. Secondly, I think that back to the feeling aspect of things, if you are a sensitive individual who has good sensitivity to the world around you, with good experience, good skills, perhaps you belong on the A team in Recon. Maybe you're an A team player. And so not everyone can be A team. There has to be a B team. There has to be a C team. And every time there's a job to be done, if you're on the A team, you don't want to be deployed every single time. Because how does the B team get good? How does the C team get good? How does A team catch some sleep? And so Recon, we're thinking about it now, we're talking about it now as just an individual, but now building it out to teams. Perhaps you're responsible either corporately or in some form of business. You're responsible to put assets or individuals within the loose definition of a Recon capacity. Well, consider your teams. You can't keep putting your A team into the business meeting. We really need this contract. Get the A team Reconners. And they just keep getting thrown into the job constantly until they frazzle out. As a leader within a reconnaissance environment, make sure you've got an A, B, and C team on standby.
That's a great point. Seb, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, succession planning, right? Like it's critical, and it's a terrifying prospect when you find yourself in a place where I got 4 guys that can do this, and that's it. You know, as a team leader or as somebody that's leading a team, you don't want that. You want to make sure that you have plenty of redundancy. You know, to deal with the things that are going to change and whatnot, one of the ways to do that is cooperation recce. And again, this is applicable to absolutely anything, but we used to do a basic recce to establish a course of actions, right? Like, how do we think we want to hit this target? And that, again, can be metaphorically applicable. It's not necessarily tactical. But then once the plan was written and we had everything that we thought we needed, then there was a confirmation recce right prior to a hit. Right. And that confirmation recce is to make sure that things haven't changed in the last 24 hours, 18 hours, 12 hours enough that it would require us to modify our course of action. Right. And that's something that's often forgotten. And just make sure that you are closer to H hour. So whatever that H hour is, that you are closer to that time when the last recce was conducted. You know, and the shorter you can do that without compromise, the better it is. And so And Tim's already spoken to, having your contingencies and your hard and your soft compromise and all of those things. So what are you doing as a team if there is a hard or a soft compromise on this target here, or during the recce or any other time? How can we sort of, what plan do we have in place to make sure that we can continue with this operation, that we don't have to abort completely because we are completely burned?
Mm. This gets into another question that I have for you guys. I remember when I was doing munitions disposal and stuff like that, we would do explosive recce's and all that stuff where you actually want to get up on the charge itself or whatever it is and figure out what it is and how to blow it up and all those things. But one of the things that I got taught was that that explosive recce never ends. Like it's once you get there, you begin your reconnaissance of that explosive, and all throughout the situation, all throughout bringing new charges, right up until the point, and even afterwards, after you dispose of that charge, you're still doing reconnaissance of that site. You're still doing reconnaissance of all the stuff that we're doing. So I wanted to ask you guys, because we kind of talk about this in terms of, you're on a recce or you're doing reconnaissance as a specific time frame. Like now you're doing it and now you're not. But do you guys find that it is a continual process? It's just it never really stops. You're always recceing everything around you. Seb, I'm going to come back to you on this one. What do you think?
You mean in my daily activities, so to speak?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if I would call it recce, but definitely it is. I mean, it's, it works with everything. It works with what my plan is for workouts today, what venue I intend to hit, which hike I intend to go to, what the weather is like, what's the Met report, all of those things. So we're gathering information about the things that we want to engage in regularly. And that goes to, the kids or whatever the case may be. And so, yeah, I do address sort of daily life with a reconnaissance mindset, and also the mindset that things might have changed since last time I was there, and maybe this is no longer a viable option for me today. And that could include, the gym being closed for repairs or whatever the case may be in it, or the crunch or the grind or whatever the case may be. So yeah, it's very much applicable. The same can be said when you're looking for a mortgage lender. The same can be said when you're looking for a place to open a bank account or whatever the case may be. And Shaun knows this better than most because I think he's better than most at it. So
Absolutely. We'll come to Shaun in a second. Gunny, you got some thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'll speak from the operational standpoint from the Army, conducting reconnaissance. We've picketed the objective. We've set up the assault lines, fire base, all that good stuff. When the forces arrive, we push them onto target. But guess what's happening after that? We're put them into their assault lines. Everything's good. Then we're pushing off onto the next objective to then carry on. If we're going to do another hit and or extraction, setting up an LZ, DZ, sorry, not a DZ, just beachheads, however we're going to extract from. Likewise, in the exec protection world, an advanced team, we get it set, we bring in the teams, we get them set. Once they're set, we're moving on to the next target, repeating the process. It just never stops. You're always on. Likewise, in our civilian side, it's my holdover from executive protection days. I like to actually get a recce. If I'm going to meet up with someone, I actually drive to the spot. I do a Google map, and if I have time, I will actually drive it. It's a bit overkill, but it's just embedded into my DNA now.
Absolutely. Shaun, thoughts on this?
Yeah. As Tim was describing that, of course, he's referring to, and he's already stated it, improvise, adapt, and overcome with these kind of situations. As he laid out the assault line and as he punched forward to the next objective, he knows, I know, we all know that as you're laying out that line, you're on the clock and you have timings to meet and you have a plan, and your plan just got thrown out the window because the guys that you're trying to put in the assault line are all discombobulated and aren't really great in the dark. And so it takes longer than you expect. And now you're running 10 minutes behind. And 10 minutes is a lifetime when you only have 30 seconds to spare. And so now everything gets compressed, everything gets expedited. Now the tactical movement that you needed to do to move to the next objective just got expedited into semi-tactical because you're having to hustle. And so now what are you relying on? You're relying on your practical experience, of course, the tactical understanding of the situation, but now you're also relying on your strategic understanding of the space all around you and your own life experiences. And so the improvise, adapt, and overcome is built up based on who you are and what you've done in life. And it looks a little different for everyone. I think Tim and I have maybe even laid out assault lines together back in the day and then punched forward in the pitch black. And it's hectic, man. But it's not hectic for professionals. It's hectic for people who've never done it before. 100 times later, it's old hat. You know what's up. But even though you know what's up, just around the corners, there's the unknown that you're going to bump into, and then it's going to screw up your plan. And then it's improvise and adapt and an overcome situation. That never changes in Recon at all. Improvise, adapt, and overcome. So another quick point here on what Tim was talking about, and that is, the old habits, they do die hard, and that's good, man. There's nothing wrong with that. The only time old habits become problematic is when they're holding you back from accomplishing the things that you could have if you ditched the old habits. And as it turns out, at least in my experience, Recon is not a bad habit. It's never led me astray. It's so embedded in my life that when I ride my mountain bike around on the trails, I'm enjoying the ride, I've offloaded the ride, and I've offloaded all of the spots that I would ambush someone. Like, as I'm riding down a trail, I know where I would set up an ambush. As I'm riding down a trail, I know where the C6 would go to provide flanking fire. This is how I view the world, is through the lens of a recon guy, eyes and ears. And what are we talking about right now? The sensory understanding of the world around us, our eyes and ears, us as human beings sensing this world. It somehow feels to me that when someone wants to experience more of the world, they start seeking reconnaissance. They would want to take the course called Recon. There's no other, not that I'm aware of, there's no other title in the military that defines eyes and ears more than Recon, other than perhaps the big old tab that's behind Tim's left ear, and that's sniper. And so those two work hand in hand on the eyes and ears of the world around us. But you don't have to be on that trajectory at all. You could be, as Chance said, staring at explosives for a while. And that means you now have to apply eyes and ears. And so the title encourages people, Recon encourages people to act a certain way in their external world. And I feel that title should be something that everybody pursues, to be more aware of the world around us. Chance, you talked about eyes on the objective and, keeping eyes on those explosives and etc. Well, we all know that it's not every time that you can just take an individual and say, you're going to sit there for 3 days and watch that spot to make sure that no cows camp out behind the explosives just before we blow them up. We don't want to kill cows. So you're going to do nothing but stare at that spot for the next 3 days. There's not enough manpower for that. But what there is enough power for is using your brain to come up with an alternative solution, which is we don't have the manpower, so we're going to put a device on that spot to determine if there's anybody walking nearby, if there's any motion. So now we've got a detector on the spot that doesn't require a man. And that is like the conference room. In Recon, not always can you put eyes on the boardroom because you're not in the boardroom with the team, though you're the Recon guy. And so in that instance, what you've got to do is use a tool. And I know it sounds crazy, but you've got to identify a person that's going to be in that room, that is going to be doing the recon for you, that et cetera, et cetera. It's our job to understand our role and what the mission set is, the win conditions, for lack of a better term. And then we have to make it happen. So if we're not in the boardroom, we've got to find a way to get into that boardroom in one fashion or another.
Absolutely. Yeah. Tim, what do you got?
I just want to expand on what Shaun was saying, especially in the boardroom, leadership. Leadership has to trust reconnaissance. And that brings us back to Army days, Pathfinder platoon. I was a trooper and I'm setting up an assault line for the commando to come in. I'm a trooper briefing the major in charge of the commando. This is your best line. This is where the enemy is. He has to trust what I have to say, and a good leader will trust that, and they did. So if we're bringing this to the corporate world, it's the same thing. If you have a boss that's relying on your information gathering, good leadership has to trust that information gathering and not second guess it.
That's a great point. Seb, you got any additional on this?
Yeah, I mean, it just brings you back to the whole responsibility. What is my responsibility here, and how much impact could this have if it's not done correctly? So I need to do all the little things right, and that's the only acceptable standard. Now, one of the things that's really interesting that Tim, I think might have been Tim that was talking about, or actually it might have been Sean, but with the speed compression, one of the I would say one of the biggest misconception in the tactical world anyways is speed, surprise, and violence of action solves everything. And oftentimes what you find is that speed reduces security. And so it's important that you're able to, and I'm not suggesting that there are no times where you absolutely have to do that, but there has to be a known and articulable reason why you're increasing speed and knowingly reducing security, and without getting into what that can be, it really doesn't matter. It can be anything. You just don't have the luxury of time. Now you're going to have to reduce security. Also, what Sean was talking about when it comes to multi-layered recce, I forgot that earlier when we were talking about, corroboration recce's, those types of things. You have multi-layered recce's. Like, why don't I get as many different viewpoints of the same target, of the same problem set? And so if that means in a tactical context where you get the airplane up, the air one, and a variety of drones and things that you can use to your benefit to establish what's going on target, and then have your eyes on target as well as a sort of secondary means, or vice versa. Now you have corroboration of information. Now you're starting to dial in that the information is very most likely accurate. I say most likely because it can still get weird at times, but I think that's an important piece to realize. How can we double up and triple up on what we are observing? And one of the things that we used to never do with our guys is to tell them what we had discovered during a recce, because we didn't want to influence what they perceived. So it was like, do your cooperation, or do whatever it is that you need to be doing. But when you come back, I want you to form an opinion yourself on your observations. And then we can marry them up and see where we have discrepancy, and we can, dive deeper into some of the observation gaps.
This is, and we're getting into some really interesting stuff in I can't believe we're already at 48 minutes already. It's mind blowing. But the the question I have for you guys on this specific situation where we're at right now is how much prior knowledge is taken into effect, right? Let's say you want to hit a particular business as a business person. I know this other business, and maybe I want to take it over. Maybe I want to move into its market share. Maybe I want to do this, but you already know what they do. Perhaps you used to work there. Perhaps you have a friend that works there. Whatever, you have a bunch of information that's pre-known. How do we assuage that bias? How do we put that aside and just look at it through an objective lens? Sean, I'll come to you first. What do you think?
Well, I can't believe no one said it yet. I thought Tim would kind of crack this one out of the park right up at the front end, and that is, time spent on a recce is never wasted. And so if you've got 12 hours to play with before you step into your boardroom, spend all 12 hours doing recon in one fashion or another. And that is recon on the company, recon on the specific individuals, recon on what your expectations are as you step in there, et cetera, et cetera. Spend all of your time getting in front of the problem before the problem appears in real time. And so no time is ever wasted on a recce. Now, if we're talking about the corporate world, and again, you don't have to be wearing a suit and tie to be in a corporate world. And the disguises that you might have to wear as you move through your various careers in the future will be perhaps less suit and tie and might be a little bit more coveralls. If you step into a career that requires coveralls, you're still doing recon. If you're in a suit and tie, you're still doing recon. You don't need army boots to do recon. It's all about eyes and ears in the moment. And so you're gathering information, but you're analyzing the information, making patternized determinations that you can then project into the future to tell the future. And that is generally what you're doing as an extremely good recon asset. What you'll be able to do is go somewhere, embed yourself in that moment, and then tell the future. Reporting it back to whoever needs to hear what the future is going to be. And what's the future? What am I talking about? 10 seconds from now, a minute from now, a day from now, a week from now. You look at various timelines to ascertain what the future holds for all the people that are standing behind you and about to step into it. So recon is not about suits and it's not about combat boots. It's about you opening your eyes and ears, understanding the moment, analyzing it, creating a pattern out of it, punching forward into the future to predict what the next move is, and then passing it on to the body behind you.
Absolutely. Gunny, thoughts on this?
Yeah, reconnaissance got to be relevant right now, and trust has to be built. So if we go back to the multi-layer, say with executive protection operations, we've conducted our advances. Maybe the advance team had to leave, so we don't have foot on ground. We got to use our UCs undercover. We don't work with them. We trust that the professional. We trust they're on the ground and giving us that information. So that works hand in hand. Trust is the key to reconnaissance, but it has to be relevant. If I repeat an objective 3 hours ago, and I haven't been on there again, I can't trust that information. I can only use about 10% of that information. Another bigger force could have come in. Things could have changed. Crew served weapons could be in place. So time has to be relevant to your reconnaissance.
Absolutely. Seb, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, just to answer your question, essentially, a knowledge of bias is the big key in self-regulating it, right? Like you need to understand that you have a bias, that when you approach a target set, whatever the information is that you're privy to before you started, you created a scenario in your mind. And as long as you're aware that you created a scenario in your mind, you can go out there and sort of, flush it out. Remember those boards we used to write on, and then you would shake them, and they would essentially disappear. That's kind of how I addressed things when I was on the team, even if it was rewriting a plan or whatever the case was, is having an understanding of what it is that I think I know, or what it is that we know at the time, what it is that I anticipate we will be doing, and why. Have it all written out, do all the things. But if I had to look at it through a different lens, then it was complete blank canvas. We're recreating this opportunity, and hopefully a lot better. And so, yeah, just recognizing that if you don't even walk through life thinking that you have certain cognitive biases, I don't know what to tell you. That's going to create some issues, right?
Yeah. Etch-a-sketch is what it's called, but go ahead, Shaun.
Etch-a-sketch, yeah. I was just thinking it would take so long to write out a plan on an etch-a-sketch. The one thing that I failed to address, which was specifically your question, Chance, and Seb just touched back on it again. One of the reasons that I think recon is best small team, or as an individual, or perhaps perfectly it's a two-person team, but recon is small. And the reason for that, and I think the real power in it, is you can send 3, 4, 5 small recon teams against an objective or against a larger mission set, and they'll all look at things a little bit differently. And then when you all get back together and combine your heads, everyone's got a little bit of a different opinion, because generally speaking, recon thinks outside of the box. They have a big footprint. They're big thinkers. They're big seers and hearers, And so they take this big plan and they distill it down into a pattern that's being analyzed correctly. And then they're willing to pass on their thoughts on the matter, not tell anyone what to do, though we do that from time to time, but we're passing on our determinations of the real-time set of problems in front of us. But 3, 4, 5 small teams on the same objective, generally speaking, they'll all see and report back similar stuff, almost similar enough to be identical, but there's enough play in there from small team to small team to small team that they'll all see some different things. And so to that point that was made earlier, if I'm going in and putting eyes on the objective, if I'm skulking around a place by myself, when I get back to where I'm supposed to get, I'm not telling everyone everything before they go out and do their thing, because I want them to have a clean set of eyes. It's called a cold eye review in the business world, in the corporate world. So there's a cold eye review corporately, and there's a cold eye review tactically or strategically within the military and Leo space. So I'm not saying don't spoil it for anyone by telling them all the things that you got in your recon. What I am saying is try to create a bit of a firewall between what you see and what that other person sees, so you can put your heads together at a little later date.
Absolutely. Now I have one final question for you guys, and it's pretty simple. So we're gonna do that, and then we'll get into some final thoughts afterwards. But here's the question: to think back to yourself at the very beginning of your career. You were a brand new dude. You're just starting to learn reconnaissance. You've never done this before, or you're talking to a brand new soldier or a brand new business owner or like somebody who's just started. They've only ever heard the word recon once in their life before. What would you tell them? What would be the gem, the little piece of information that they could utilize for the rest of their career, life, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? What would be that one piece of information? Gunny, come to you first. What do you think?
That you get the first hit on whatever you're observing. You get to see and experience what's going on. So it's the communications thing. You know, if you think when you're a signaler radio man and you're listening to what's going on, the rest of the troops don't hear the bigger battle space. With reconnaissance, you are going to be already on that objective days, hours before another force. So you're actually getting that mental picture first. With that, you already know what the other objective is. You know what their mission is. So you can get that bigger picture and understand what's going on in the battle space.
I like it. Seb, what would you say?
Yeah, kind of in line with that. For me, it would be potentially helping them decide what are the areas of concerns based on the specific problem set that you have, because there are things that are going to be more catastrophic than others in depending on what it is that you are trying to accomplish. So what is the foreseeable mission here? What are we trying to do? And what are some of the things that can interfere with that mission execution? And how to eventually learn how to prioritize those, right? Like we know, if you're worried about hard compromise, or you're worried about an assault force coming in, maybe you're worried about comms capabilities. Maybe if you're looking at a scenario that's very hostage specific, maybe you're worried about endless barricades. Maybe you're worried about areas of separation. Maybe you're worried. Anyways, the list goes on and on. But the point is, I would say to this person what it is that we are trying to accomplish today. Why are we going eyes on target on that specific house? And okay, this, and this. Okay, what do you think are the important pieces that we cannot miss? I mean, there's a lot of important pieces, but the ones that are catastrophic. And then have them start thinking along those lines, because you can bring back a bunch of valuable information that has no bearing on the operation. Like we want to make sure that it's relevant.
Absolutely. Shaun, thoughts?
Day oneer in recon, maybe this is their day one of wanting to be in it. I think what I would do is sit them down and explain to them how their world just changed from what they used to do yesterday to now what they're responsible for today. And what they're responsible for is joining a small organization that is responsible for a massive organization in the near future. So you go out and you're going to make decisions that are going to directly impact many others at a later date. So you have to understand the importance of the job that you're doing, the ramifications of when you do your job poorly. And so between those two states, you have to get right with the idea of dialing up that rotary dial of responsibility and really pouring yourself in at an 11 out of 10 to make sure that you're doing your job to the best of your ability.
Absolutely. I remember when we first started learning how to use the metal detectors for mine clearance and stuff like that, and they were constantly harping on us about understanding that it's not just you. It's not just you and the three guys that are around you. It's the fact that people are following in your footsteps and they're trusting their life in your footsteps. So take it as that, and then you will your effectiveness basically increases as you realize that and start putting in the work that's necessary for it. Now, we are just a little bit over an hour now. Let's get some final thoughts on reconnaissance, on anything we've talked about so far, or anything else that's still bubbling in the back of your brain. Seb, I'm going to start with you. Final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I saw a saying yesterday that says something along the lines of if your people around if the people around you don't elevate you, you don't have a circle, you have a cage. And I think that that's an important piece here. I mean, most of the things, most of the things that we are trying to accomplish in the broader context needs a team, and the team that you have around you is critical. So make sure that you have the right people doing the right things based on the objective.
Love that. Gunny, thoughts?
Yeah, if you're a military person thinking about moving into the reconnaissance world, I say do it. It's a long road. It's hard. However, it's going to be rewarding for the rest of your career. It will set you up. If you haven't got your leadership course already, it will set you up for success for your leadership course. It'll give you a full understanding of battle procedure, orders, format, and patrolling itself before you move into the harder stuff. So if you're thinking about it, do it. And remember, the gateway is you have to have comms first. So make sure you get yourself on the communications course.
That's a good point. Sean, final thoughts?
I'm going to come at it from, because the fellows have already covered off what I was kind of thinking. So I'm going to come at it from the long-term perspective of, well, you, at some point in your young life, you decided to commit to recon, the way of recon, recce as a whole. You got better and better at it. And then at one point you became a bit older and you realized that you live your life through the recce lens. Well, congratulations, because your life's a whole lot easier. The things that you see and hear, the things that you know and do are different than a lot of other people out there. It's a bit of a superpower. If you can get on the recce trajectory for a few years, when you get out of that recce trajectory, you're a different human being than a lot of other human beings around you. It'll give you superpowers, not just in the field, but in the boardroom, in the coffee lineup. Generally in life, you'll be better served by becoming more aware through the recce lens.
That is a great point. Now we have this one comment here that I've been saving. Came in earlier, but I've been saving it because it's the perfect way to finish off today's show. It's from Yuri. Good to see you, Yuri. It says, "If you know yourself and your enemy, there is no danger in battle." And I think that is a variation of a Sun Tzu quote, but it is exactly what we're talking about. So, thank you guys, Tim, Seb, John. Great combo. We're gonna have to do probably a part 2, possibly a part 3. There's just so much information in terms of reconnaissance that we have barely scratched the surface. As I said, I don't know how many 100 times last year, but I really appreciate you guys. That's a great combo. So as we all continue to learn, build, and grow, we'll see y'all next week. Chimo.
Chimo.